Well, hello, everyone. It's your girl Gabrielle. Sorry, I'm laughing. So I'm like, wow, I look like as usual, I look like I just woke up. But anyway, but yes, welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. It's your girl Gabrielle, and let me tell you what this show is about. If you are new to the show, or maybe you're returning to the show and you just need a refresher, let me tell you what this show is all about. So, this is the show where we like to talk real talk about real things, right? So, we like to focus on things in education, things in empowerment, what else? Employment. We've done topics about homeschooling, resiliency, disabilities, chronic pain. What else? Self care, entrepreneurship. We've done a variety of different topics, and today is no different. I am looking forward to this conversation today because it is a repeat topic, you guys. I love it when I bring back topics on the show because, because I like to look at multiple perspectives of the same thing. So I definitely want to have this conversation and I am looking forward to this conversation. Let me tell you what the conversation is today. So, today's topic is gig work, part two. So, this is part two of the topic of gig work. We're going to explore the gig world, and I definitely want to hash this conversation, especially with my own personal experience in gig work. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation and expanding on this conversation and actually bringing it to light, right? Because how many people actually know about it, or how many people actually talk about it? There's a whole world out there, and how many people actually bringing to light, what does it mean to, be an Uber driver? What does it mean to work for Lyft? What does it mean to work for, DoorDash, Grubhub, all that stuff? So we're going to get into that today. And my guest is, I hope I'm saying her name right, Emma Yasinski. I hope I'm saying her name right. And let me tell you about her briefly. She is a freelance science and medical journalist who has experience with gig work, simply put. All right. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring her to the stage. Hi, Emma. How you doing today?
Good, good. How are you, Gabrielle?
Good, good. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you did. Emma
Yes.
Yasinski.
Yasinski. Fabulous, fabulous. All right, so we are going to have the discussion about gig work. I'm looking forward to having you tell your experience to our audience. So I'm just going to have you dive right into it. So please tell us your experience with gig work.
Well, today I'm a freelance science and medical journalist, which sometimes is considered gig work because I am a freelancer and I have multiple clients. But over the past 7 years, as I built up my client roster and became was able to fill a full-time schedule with this freelance work, I did some other types of gig work like dog walking and teaching swim lessons.
All right. So let's dive into that. So you're a freelance journalist. What is that?
I am a journalist, but I don't write for one specific magazine or newspaper. I write for multiple newspapers and magazines. And what happens is I come up with an idea and I will send an email to an editor and say, hey, I have this idea. Is this an article you'd be interested in running? And if they are, they'll tell me, how much they're willing to pay for it and when they, need it by. We'll figure out a deadline together. I write it and they pay me. Every now and then you might have longer term relationships where if I start writing for one particular editor a lot, they might offer me more work even when I'm not pitching them. And I have a part-time gig as well, writing for one particular magazine that takes up about half my time, and I pitch freelance work during the rest of it.
So now, so all right, so you're freelance, so meaning that you don't actually work for a particular company. So you're self-employed
Yes.
essentially. So you work for yourself and then you you pitch articles to other companies?
Yes. So if there's an editor, for example, at the New York Times in the health or science section, because that's where I would typically write, and I see a study that I think that their readers would be interested in, I will email that editor and they will decide whether or not they want me to write about that study. But I could email anybody, any editor.
How many people or how many different companies do you reach out to?
I'm always expanding. I'd say that I regularly speak to 6 or 7 different editors.
Is it the same editors that you work with constantly? Is it always new editors?
So it's a little bit of both. Those 6 and 7 would be the repeat clients, but sometimes if I have an idea that I think will fit better with a different outlet, I'll find out who their editor is and reach out to them for the first time.
So now, why is it that you don't work for any one of them directly as an employee?
Why do I choose that? Why do I
Yeah,
choose
why do you
that
choose
route?
that? Yeah.
I like the freedom to write for whatever kind of topics I want. I choose a topic I'm interested in, and then I decide to write about it, and then I find somebody who wants it. So that's a big perk. It also means that if I work for a particular magazine, I would have a specific beat that I would be most likely to stay to. I wouldn't get to write about a ton of different topics the same way. This gives me more freedom in what I cover and who I cover it for. I mean, different magazines have different writing styles. So there could be a straightforward news story that was sort of the example I was giving. Here's a study, here's what it means, the end. But I can also write big feature articles for a magazine like The Atlantic or something like that if I think that that makes more sense. In addition, I have freedom. When somebody assigns me an article, they don't get to tell me what hours to work. They can't say you have to write this article between 9 and 5 p.m. I can do it at 3 in the morning if I want, as long as I get it done by deadline.
So you said the word freedom, right? So there's a sense of creating your own schedule, working when you want, as much as you want. There's a sense of like independence that you have that is not available for a regular 9 to 5 employee job.
That's correct. And that's a big draw to this type of employment.
So now the question is, which a lot of employees like to ask, or what about job security, or what about benefits, what about all that good stuff? So what do you say to those people?
Sure. I mean, there are perks and drawbacks. I do have to buy my own health insurance. None of my clients give that to me. And I have to pay quarterly taxes on my own. It's not taken out of my paycheck the way it would be if I was a full-time employee. But when it comes to job security, I would say that in some ways I have even more, because if one client drops me, I have 6 other ones. Whereas if you have one full-time job, if your boss gets rid of you, you have 0 jobs left. So there, in some ways, I have more flexibility there too, in terms of security.
So now, how does the compensation work? Do you get paid for each article that you turn in?
It actually varies. So for the most part, you get paid, or I get paid by the article. It could be a flat rate for the article that we agree on the exact amount when I pitch it, or it could be we agree on a per word rate. So I get $1 per word, whatever the length of the article ends up being. Then I also, I think I touched on it before, I have a longer term relationship with one particular client, MedShadow, where I write 20 hours a week. And for that one, I get paid hourly. And it's approximately 20 hours a week. I bill them for however many hours I work.
Okay. So how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for about 7 years, and I would say I got it up to truly full time, where I didn't do any of the other gig work, about 3 or 4 years ago.
So you would consider yourself working full time, because you have
Yes.
that one client that you do 20 hours for, and then the rest of the other hours is the other clients.
In terms of the amount of hours of work I put in a day, I'm at full time or beyond it at this point.
So now there's working full time and then being paid full time. So
Right.
I like to distinguish between the two. So do you feel that you're being paid full time?
Yes, I do. Early on, not so much. I mean, sometimes it's harder to get the better paying work. You have to work your way up to that. But at this point, I do believe I'm being paid as if I have a full-time job. I make a reasonable wage for the work that I do.
So do you find yourself secure in terms of, you know, paying your bills, you know, paying rent, you know, I don't know your housing situation, but in terms of living comfortably every day?
Yes, at this point, I certainly am. But there was, as I mentioned before, early on, there I had to do other things to make ends meet. So it took me a while, but now I'm definitely secure. I make enough to pay my bills and live life reasonably comfortably.
Wonderful. So let's talk about those other things
Mhm.
that you've done. So in our preliminary interview, you talked about working for Rover. I wrote it down. Hold on. So
Mhm.
Rover, private swim lessons. So let's dive into that. So you worked for Rover.
Mhm.
So just if you could tell our audience what that company is and what they do.
So Rover is a dog walking app. Essentially, I started in December of 2017. I had to submit an application, tell them essentially that I had, in fact, walked dogs before. I had to have a friend write in and say, yes, Emma has taken care of my dog. She did a good job. And they did a background check on me and they look at where I live. And then once that's all been approved, they put my profile up, and people who are looking for dog walkers will see a list of dog walkers in their area. And so my profile can show up if they think that I sound like a good match for them. They'll message me and see if I'm available during the time that they want. And I'll go meet their dog and take them for a walk. And then Rover would pay me through PayPal for each walk.
Ah, okay. So what happened that made you want to work for Rover?
So this was still relatively early in the freelance career. I had started swim lessons before this, but I thought that Rover would offer me a little more flexibility in terms of the timing when you need to walk the dogs. You tend to have a bigger window. For example, swim lessons, if someone wants to do a lesson at 2 p.m., you have to be there at 2 p.m. Dog walking, they say anywhere between 5 and 8. Come over. It also, I figured there'd be more dogs in my area, and I wanted to break up the day a little bit. Freelance writing, as much as I love it, I'm sitting at my desk staring at the computer inside all day. So having a good reason to get outside, see a dog, go for a short walk is a benefit both for lifestyle and a couple extra dollars.
Right. So sorry, I forgot you did swim lessons before Rover.
That's okay.
But we'll work backwards. But so you were you were freelancing. You were in the early parts of your freelance journalism career. You know, you're just getting it off the ground. You know, you're not full time yet. You needed extra money to make ends meet,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what, you know, after the swim lessons, that's what led you to do Rover.
Yes.
And tell us your experience on the app. What was your experience working with Rover?
It was relatively easy to get set up. I got approved quickly. The main hurdle is that early on, the when you see all the other people, if you're a person looking for a dog walker and you see all the profiles, you'll see somebody that has 100 reviews from other clients on Rover already. You know that they've walked a ton of dogs in the area. So if you're new like me, it took me 3 or 4 months to get my first client because I mean, I get it. Why would you go with somebody that had no reviews versus someone that had 100 already? But once I got a first client, things started to pick up because you have somebody vouch for you, and I got a few more requests from there. And each time I'd get a request, I could say yes or no. So that's one of the characteristics of gig work, right? So if I decide I don't feel like walking that dog or I'm not available at that time, I just say no for each project or task. So I would go, yeah, I'd say yes, I would like to walk this dog, and I might go meet the dog, and then it goes on my calendar. And when I go to walk the dog, I check in with the app, and it can trace you. You're required to do that, but a lot of people like it. So it'll say, okay, well, you walked this far. You send a picture of the dog, put them back inside. You do it for 30 minutes, and then send a message to the owner and say, I did the walk. Everything's fine. Dog's happy. Thanks for your time. I'll see you later. Um, and then a few days later, you get you get a notification that Rover sent you money via PayPal.
Oh, okay. So they paid you with PayPal, so of course you have to factor in PayPal fees.
They
So
covered that part, so that didn't affect me at the time.
oh, they cover it. Oh, okay, interesting, interesting. So is it you brought up an interesting thing in that when you're new on the platform, it's like it's like you're competing with people who have more experience, and so you have to
Mhm.
wait for, someone to take a chance on you as a newbie. And that was one of the challenges that I had when I did apps like not so much to live, not really Postmates, but I more so with TaskRabbit, right? When you're new to the
Mhm.
platform, it's like you have to kind of hope and pray and wait for someone to hire you, and then the one person that hires you, and you do well, and then it's sort of like how the algorithm is made and how the app is structured, and that the more tasks you do, the more tasks come to you, right?
Mhm.
So did you get that feeling with Rover, like the more you did, the more they gave you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the very first client that I got wasn't just serendipity and somebody taking a chance on me. It
Mhm.
was a friend of a friend recognized me. She was going through the app looking for someone, and she was like, "Hey, I know that person. I'll go with her. I know her." And that was the first client that I got. Um, and then after that, I got a couple more, and from there, I definitely got more and more.
So did you work enough to, because you were doing this and the freelancing,
Yes.
so did you work enough hours? Well, first, how many hours did you work a week with
I was
Rover?
not working that many hours. This was very much a side gig. I was never trying to make it even remotely close to first full time. So maybe 3 hours a week doing this, if not less. So I
Oh,
was making an extra $50 to $100 a week, maybe.
how much was each gig usually?
I charged $15 to $18 for different services. So one thing that Rover does is you can choose whether you want to set your rates yourself or if you want it to automatically set them based on competition in your area, like what everybody else charges. And that's generally what I did. I just let them set it. And it tended to be $15 for what's called a drop in visit, where I didn't actually take the dogs for a walk. I would feed them and pet them and leave, and $18 for an actual walk,
And how long was the walk?
30 minutes. So each one was expected to be 30 minutes, either way.
Oh, okay. So what if somebody wanted longer than 30 minutes?
They could probably book two in a row. I did have some people ask here and there. And they also had settings which I didn't do, but other people do, where you could be a house sitter, so you'd stay, the whole night or something like that with the dog, or you'd have the dogs come to you and you'd board them for the day. So usually if someone wanted much longer than, if they wanted a 45-minute walk, I would just do it. But if they wanted that kind of, all day care or long, several hours, I would recommend that they do the boarding or something like that.
Oh, okay. All right. So you didn't commit a lot of hours to Rover. Was it you
No,
wanted to put more hours to the freelance journalism?
right. That was just enough, to pay for my groceries here and there. That's about it.
All right. So now before that, which I know we
Mhm.
skipped ahead a bit, you did the swimming lessons. Tell us about that.
So I've been a swimmer my whole life. I was a lifeguard as a teenager. So before I actually became a journalist, like when I was in college, I taught swim lessons over the summer, just at neighborhood pools. And it was the kind of thing a parent would see me teaching a swim lesson and they'd ask me to teach their kid. And it steamrolled to the point where I was teaching from the moment the pool opened to the moment it closed all summer long. Um, but then I went on to graduate and become a journalist, and I moved. So where I live now is not where I grew up, and I didn't know anybody. But I thought, well, I know I teach pretty good swim lessons. Let's see if there's something I can do to make some extra money while I'm trying to start this freelance business. And I found a website. Aquamobile Swim School was the one, but there's a few out there like it. Um, where I did something similar to the Rover app. I did a brief video interview application. I had to show that I was CPR certified and first aid certified. So sort of like the background check, show that I'm qualified to do this. And then they
Mhm.
would set up my profile online. And when they had a customer service department. So instead of people just picking me directly, they would go on and they would say, I am in this town and I'm looking for a swim teacher to come to my neighborhood pool. And then the customer service person would look and say, okay, so we've got, two or three instructors in this area. And she would email us and say, okay, are one of you free? Can you do this lesson? This is when they want to do it. This is where they want to do it. And I would answer, yes, I can teach that swim lesson and go from there.
So okay, so again, at this stage, you're trying to build your, so everything is centered around your freelance business, it sounds like.
Yes.
Right. So you're trying to build your freelance journalism business, and you're just starting, not making enough money, and so you're looking for something to complement that.
Yes.
So why didn't you look for a steady part-time job, something that was like 20 hours a week or even 10 hours a week?
So the swim lessons were because essentially that had been my steady job prior to becoming a journalist to some extent, and I was familiar with it. But it was also, I really was focused 100% on the journalism, and my intent was to make that full time. So I knew that, if I took a steady job that was 20 hours a week, as soon as I got up to 20 hours a week of journalism, I would have to quit. Whereas with the gig work, my schedule could go up and down to match whatever the demands of journalism were. So if I was really, really busy for a couple weeks, I got a couple big projects, things went well. I didn't have to do any gig work that week. I could focus just on journalism. And then if I had a little bit of a dry spell, my pitches weren't landing and I didn't have any work, I could try to do a little more gig work.
So it's sort of like a balance, right? So, being freelance, you're relying on the availability of assignments, right?
Yes.
So if you have a lot of assignments, you're good, right? But there's, as with any entrepreneurship journey, there's ups and downs, ebbs and flows. So when the work goes down, then you pick back up by doing the gig work as a way to complement it.
Yes.
All right, so tell us about the swim lessons. What was each assignment like?
So they would email me, like I said, and if I accepted the lesson, then I would drive to wherever the client lived or their neighborhood pool or their backyard pool, wherever it was that they were able to do a lesson. I would show up, I would teach an hour-long lesson, and I would say bye. And then I would get paid from, I think it was direct deposit for Aquamobile for the 1 hour lesson. It took a little while, just like Rover, to get my first client. It took a few months, but once I did, just like Rover, I started to get a couple more. But that one especially was very seasonal because people want to swim in the summer. I do live in Florida, so sometimes you would get the kind of people that came on vacation and wanted to do, one swim lesson a day for a week while they were here in the winter. But it was, definitely not a reliable situation because you had people in the summer, you had people who wanted just a week, you had people who wanted to do it once a week for a long time, people who just wanted one lesson to practice, see if they could figure out how to breathe, So there was a lot of variety there.
So were did you I know you were complementing this with the freelancing, but
Mhm.
how many hours a week did you do the swim lessons?
Probably about 2 hours a week, most weeks.
Oh, so you weren't committed to this one as well.
No, I did. I mean, I would have one or two clients at a time, 1 to 3 lessons a week. It ended up taking a little bit more time because some of the clients were further away and I had to drive to them. And that was part of why I didn't pursue it as fully because you're paid for the time when you're teaching the lesson. So then if I have to drive 30 minutes, teach an hour-long lesson, drive 30 minutes home, or even to the next lesson, I'm only paid for that 1 hour in the middle. And there's a whole other hour there that I'm not compensated for. So that made it less practical for me. If all the lessons had been at one pool, maybe I would do a whole chunk of them at once, and that would have been more practical to me.
Right, and that's unfortunately the downside to working for a lot of these apps is they don't compensate you. Well, at least not the food delivery ones. They compensate you for mileage,
Mhm.
but in terms of like TaskRabbit, they didn't compensate for mileage. So that's one of the downsides to working for these companies is they don't compensate you for mileage or gas or anything like that.
Right.
So now, how did the rates work? How much were you paid?
The rates were okay. I think I was paid, it's been a few years. I believe it was 27 an hour at the time. The rates have probably gone up a little bit since then. So it's not a terrible rate. It's just, when you start to calculate in the driving, you divide it up. It's about half that for the amount of time that you're actually putting in. Um, there were some options. You could do a 45-minute lesson here and there, but I didn't get a lot of those. It was usually by the hour.
Oh, okay. Okay. So So it was the commute between between clients and the home. That's one of the
Mhm.
things you didn't like about it. What
Right.
else didn't you like about it?
Well, I mean, I actually had one client who was very close by that I really liked, but then I had some that were farther away. It's dependent on the weather, right? If there's a thunderstorm and I have to cancel, I don't get paid for that. You know, if the in Florida there's a lot of thunderstorms in the summer, and you try to reschedule usually, but you can't always do so.
Hmm.
Um, so that so the driving makes it a little bit less lucrative, and the weather makes it less reliable. But I mean, to be honest, I really enjoyed teaching swim lessons. It ended up taking up too much time away from the other things I wanted to do for less of a return.
Ah, so you weren't getting enough money or enough reimbursement to stick out the swim lessons.
Right. And there was also, so if I put 2 hours into doing a swim lesson, right, you know, the drive, the lesson, drive home, a shower, by the time I get back to doing journalism, that's a huge chunk of time where I can't be communicating with sources and clients. Whereas a 30-minute dog walk for the neighbor is a lot faster to squeeze in whenever it makes sense.
Right. So because of all in like all the inconveniences to you, that's why you switched over to Rover.
Right.
Okay. So with the swim lessons, were you able to choose, like pick and choose your clients, where you got to go?
Oh yeah. So you put in settings in your profile that said, you know, I'm not willing to drive more than 10 miles. And I did start to do that. So initially I had made it very broad because I was looking for anything I could get. And then I made it closer. And then anytime that you're offered a client, you're allowed to say no. So, right, the customer goes to Aquamobile. They say, I want some swim teacher. Then the customer service goes to me and I say yes or no. I don't have to say yes to everybody. Now, when I do that, sometimes I would set up a regular schedule. Somebody might say that I don't want just one lesson. I want one lesson a week at this time every week for the next 2 months. So I would be committing a little bit more upfront than I might with the dog walking to a set schedule.
So with I find with these apps that whenever you turn down a task, it's okay for a while, but if you keep turning them down, you find that you're getting less work. Did you ever get that?
Yeah, I would say with the swim school, I definitely did. I mean, initially I turned down one or two, and then, you know, once I started saying no to almost everything, they didn't bother reaching out anymore. I mean, I don't think I ever officially quit or like took my profile down. I just stopped saying yes. Um, with Rover, actually, I said no to several, and I was still getting a good deal of requests to the point where I had to change my calendar and say, I changed my calendar to basically say I'm never available. Then the one good thing about that is that if I ever do feel like walking some dogs, you know, I'm looking to get outside a little more, I have a lull in work or something, I can reactivate it and make myself available and see if I get anybody. I haven't tried that in a long time though. Both of these essentially I stopped completely around the time COVID started, and I didn't have a reason to go back. I had plenty of work by then. So I was still doing it a little bit at that point, even though I had a ton of writing it already. And then it just didn't seem worth it to go back because science and medical journalism, there's a lot of work during COVID.
All right, so it's sort of like the pandemic boost in a way.
For some people, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of journalists got sick of writing about COVID, but it was definitely right up my alley. I mean, that type of biology and uh, chemistry and medicine is the kind of thing I was already interested in and what I had been writing. So it well for me.
All right, and then even you said like if anything were to happen and go back down, you know you could always turn on Rover.
I
So
could
you have
probably
that.
email Aquamobile and say I'm still here. If something's changed, I'm ready to take lessons now.
Right. So you have that backup plan, and that's one of the things with working in the gig economy is you have that supplement. You have
Mm-hmm.
that backup plan.
Right.
Would you ever go back to Rover?
I might. I don't think it's likely. I wouldn't use it as a primary source of income. I mean, you talk about a backup plan as having these options. That's a very similar situation to what I'm in with the freelancing, right? If I lose one client, I have others and I can look for more. So my first instinct would probably not be to immediately go back to Rover. It would be to try to find another writing client.
Ah, okay. So all the writing clients are Oh no, but it's multiple companies. Okay. Sorry about that. So you're freelancing, you're the freelance journalism. It's been 7 years, so things are steady enough for you where you're comfortable economically. So now, do you think it'll stay that way, or do you think it'll shift?
I'm optimistic. I think it'll stay that way. One of the good things about this industry is that the more work I do, my name gets out there, people recognize it, and I can charge more. So instead of charging $15 for every single walk via Rover, once I prove myself to a client, I can say, okay, I'm going to raise my rates now.
So now, when the apps, did you have? Do you think you had the freedom to choose your own rates as opposed to the freelance journalism where it's you are pretty much self-employed and working for yourself? So did you have more freedom in how much you wanted to get paid on the apps and the swim school versus what you do now?
No, definitely I have more freedom in choosing how much I get paid now. With the Rover app, I technically could change my rate anytime, but because anybody who's looking for work is going to see a whole list of people, if mine is $2 more than somebody else's, it's right in front of you. You're not going to choose me. And with the swim school, they had a set amount that they were paying me. It was, this is what you get. If we give you a raise, we give you a raise. If we don't, we don't. But with writing, every client pays differently to start. Every client has a different range, but little by little, I can always ask for more. And I've moved on. You know, some clients early on were good to get my feet wet, but they don't have the budget to pay as much. So eventually you move on to somebody who can pay more once you have that experience.
So now, as a self-employed person, um, so the swimming okay, the swimming lessons in Rover, were you didn't exactly work for them technically. You were an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you deal with all the taxes, and because as an independent contractor, you're responsible for Social Security, Medicare, all that. Nothing gets taken out. You have to pay that self-employment tax every year on your tax return. So how did you handle all that?
I mean, I still do with the work that I do now. I have to do my own taxes. Honestly, I use TurboTax like a lot of people. Um, and I know, you know, the IRS.gov, I have to pay for freelance journalism. I have to pay quarterly taxes, the estimated quarterly tax. Each quarter, you send in what you think is the right amount. And then at the end of the year, you file your taxes and find out how close you were to write. It's a little bit of a game, but it works. It's fine. I do have to, I bought my own healthcare on the healthcare exchange. And so it's honestly, it's the way I've been doing it for all 7 years. I get 1099s from all my clients, whether they're writing clients or swim lessons. And uh, one year I did actually get an accountant to make sure that I was doing it right. I think that year I was doing like all three things at once. So journalism was identified as the primary gig. Anything went into that bucket, but then you had the two side gigs that I put on my taxes as well. And neither one of those usually added up to enough to really make a substantial difference in what I was paying. Most of it has always been from the journalism.
Oh, so it's so you're used to it. You're used
Yeah, and
to
it's the same thing with the journalism. It's always the 1099s. It's a pain in the butt, but it's what you got to do.
so you've never seen a tax refund.
No, not since I was maybe a teenager. It's been a long time since I saw one of those. I've always been paying a little more at the end of the year rather than getting some back.
So now what so in term would you recommend, so okay, if someone came to you and said I want to be a freelance
Mm-hmm.
journalist, what is the first step? What would you say to them?
I would say to think about what kind of writing you want to do and maybe expand your definition a little bit. So I'm primarily a journalist, but there's a big need now for content writers and blog writers for companies, and that's often a good way to get into the industry and get paid. So depending on your background and your skill set, you might consider looking into other types of, content writing is what we normally call it. So content for all kinds of outlets. Um, I would suggest that you need to start reaching out to both journalists themselves to ask for help and guidance, but also editors reach out and you can make a cold introduction. You email an editor and ask them a little bit about what types of pitches they're looking for and introduce yourself. Or you can just start with a pitch. That's how I normally do it. I start with a cold pitch because if it's a good pitch, they'll get back to you. Whereas an introduction, if they're busy, they'll think about it. So you just start pitching, honestly. You find editors and start sending your ideas. There's depending on what you want to write about. So I always write about science. There's a lot of good resources for that out there. There's a group called the Open Notebook that writes a bunch of resources for science journalists specifically. They work with the National Association of Science Writers, and there's also the Association of Healthcare Journalists, which I'm a member of. They have a ton of resources that help you get started, but also they have resources that can help you with finding healthcare and how to pay taxes and things like that as well. So getting involved in advocacy and groups like that are relevant for your niche can be really helpful.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right. What else? Okay. I'm trying to think. What else do I want to ask you? So now, was this the swim lessons, Rover, and the freelance journalism? Is that your entire work history, or did you do something before the swim lessons?
I've done a little bit. So when I graduated college, I was a sales rep for laboratory supplies for about 3 years. And then I went back to school for journalism. And then I worked at a university in their communications department for about a year. And in all honesty, I hated it and it was very boring. I quit and decided to freelance. And that's how I got here.
All right. So you went straight to freelancing?
Pretty quickly, yeah. I mean, I quit with the intention of freelancing from that job.
Oh, so you intended to do it?
Yes, I didn't try to find another job. I quit and I said, I'm going to freelance. Let's see how it goes.
So was that something you wanted to do, or was it just like, you just needed something right away and there it was?
At that point, I might have been open to a staff writing job. I knew that I didn't want to be in a communications department type role anymore. So if, the New York Times had been hiring a science writer at the time, I probably would have been perfectly happy to take that job. But I knew that wasn't a likely situation. So it's not that I went out really looking for that. I said, I'm going to try to freelance. And if I see a job that makes sense, I'll apply. But freelancing will be the main plan.
Right, because you want the freedom and to choose your schedule, to work as much as you want, as long as you want.
Yes. And I very much like that the amount of work I do is correlated with the amount of money I make. I resented when I was working at the university that, I had to stay there till 5, even if I was done with my work, because that was how I got paid. Or that, if you work late, it doesn't make any difference in the amount you get paid. So with the freelancing, I get paid by the project. Doesn't matter, and when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I can do what I want.
All right. Because, with I know in social work, sometimes you work, 9 to 5, sometimes you work after 5, but you still get paid the same 8 hours. So, that's one of the downsides to,
right. If I decide to work a 60-hour week, I'm going to get paid like I worked a 60-hour week, not a 40-hour week.
Right. You want to get paid your worth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's start to wind things down now. So do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
I'm sure you've noticed the theme of freedom in this discussion, so that's really important to me, but it's not the number one thing for everybody. But if gig work sounds like it's the kind of thing that would work for you and your lifestyle, I say go for it. I work just as much now as most people that I know with typical full-time jobs, and I really value the freedom and control it provides me. But you have to make sure, as I learned early on with some of the gig work, you have to consider any of the unpaid time that goes into it. Things like driving, relationship building, skill building, the times you take putting into developing a pitch before you send it or sell it to somebody. Those are all things that you don't get paid for when you're doing this type of work. So when you're trying to figure out your return on investment, it's important to take those things into account.
Fabulous. All right. Emma, thank you so much for the interview. Thank you so much for joining me today. All right. So let me get up your banner here. All right, you guys. So Emma Yasinski, it is now promo time. All right. So if you want to learn more about her and all that she has to offer, you can visit her online. Her website is emmayasinski.com. It is just her name.com, right? You could also follow her on Facebook. It is just her name, Emma Yasinski. Well, there's a period, so watch to get that period. Emma period Yasinski. She's also on Twitter. The handle is Emma Yaz 24. She's also on TikTok, science underscore journal underscore Emma. So she has a lot of videos on there. And she's also on LinkedIn, just her name, Emma Yasinski. So I encourage you to follow her on all of her accounts, stay in touch with her. If you want to reach out to her, if you have any questions, I encourage you to reach out to her. All of her information is in the scrolling marquee at the bottom of your screen if you are watching this on video. And for my audio people, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, I did not forget about you. All of this information is in the description. So I encourage you to, check her out, check out all of her accounts and follow her. Don't just check it out, but actually follow her and, like her page, all that. Stay in touch with her and reach out to her if you have any questions. Emma, is there anything else you want to share about your services or anything else you want to promote about yourself?
I think that's it. Feel free to reach out with any science writing needs. But other than that, thanks so much for having me on.
All right, so she does write articles, for companies. So if you are, do you do content creation?
I do a little bit, yeah, here and there.
All right, so there you go. So if you're a small business, you're looking for content writers, Emma is your girl. I don't know if you're a newspaper editor, I don't know if you are watching this or you need an article written about for anything science related, reach out to Emma as well. So she is your writer. So if you're looking for a writer for your business or for your newspaper or newsletter or whatever. It's only science though, right? That's you only do
Yes, I
science.
specialize in science and medicine. I mean, it's pretty broad: public health, healthcare, things, anything that falls under that umbrella.
Okay, science, health, anything in the health world. She writes articles. So if you're looking for someone to write an article for you, reach out to Emma. All right, Emma, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I'll place you backstage now. And it is just you and me, guys. All right. So, you guys, we have reached the conclusion of yet another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I just want to remind you that Hot Topics is a part of my company, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So, we provide, myself as long as trying to get my words together. It's myself along with my group of tutors. We provide one-on-one tutoring, test prep, college counseling, editing and proofreading, and we also have a series of virtual workshops. So if you are looking for any of those services, I encourage you to reach out to us. Our website is www.astepaheadtutoringservices.com. You can also give us a call if you're in the US or Canada. Our phone number is 347 762 2838. You could also email us success at a step ahead tutoring services.com. And we are also on multiple social media sites. So I encourage you to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, trying to think, Eventbrite, WhatsApp, and YouTube. So just A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. That is our name. So just look us up and follow us. Twitter is a unique one. It is just ASATS 2013. That is the username. But either way, just type in the name A Step Ahead Tutoring Services and you will find us. Find us on social media and follow us. Please stay in touch with us and learn anything and everything there is to know about A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So if you're looking for our services, please reach out to us. I also want to encourage you to leave your feedback about this episode. I want to know, what did you think about this episode? Drop your comments in the comment section or in the comment thread. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, drop a rating. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Leave a comment. Give us your feedback. There's so many ways that you can give us your feedback, whether it's just a simple star or typing a sentence or two, but let us know your feedback about this episode. I will definitely appreciate that. And finally, I encourage you to join our text blast. Hot Topics, our podcast, Hot Topics, has a text blast. I encourage you to get on it. You will learn about upcoming live episodes, the audio releases every week. I encourage you to get on that text blast. So the phone number to that, well, first, text the code Hot Topics to 917-764-3975. Once again, just text the code Hot Topics to 917-764-3975. It is only for the US and Canada at this time. So for my international listeners, if you want to get on the text blast, just send us an email to success@stepaheadtutoringservices.com. I know that was a mouthful, but if you missed any of that, it is scrolling below at the bottom of your screen if you are watching this on video. And if you are listening to this on a podcast, all of this information is in the description. All right, you guys, and that is it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to you joining us at the next episode. Thank you again, you guys. And now I am signing off.